Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Cannon Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello and welcome to the show. Cannon Carr here, and I am excited about today's show. We have one of the leading entrepreneurs in Atlanta, one of the leading innovators in Atlanta, real estate, and excited to bring him to you. But before we do that, I want to introduce someone who's alongside me in the studio today, and that's Lara Dolan. Lara actually works for the company that our guest founded. She's a top producer for Ansley, the Ansley North office, and she specializes in the Milton and Alpharetta area. And so, Lara, excited to have you on the show. You're a friend of the firm, and we've also had a chance to co-host some great events together. So this is another example of that in the podcast. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, Cannon, thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here, and I am happy to talk about our founder of Ansley Real Estate, Bonneau Ansley. He has developed and sold property in Georgia and South Carolina over the past 2 decades. In fact, he was the youngest agent in Georgia to reach $1 billion in sales. He's an Atlanta entrepreneur, author, and business owner who started Ansley Real Estate in December of 2015. Since then, Ansley Real Estate has been recognized for being one of Georgia's fastest growing middle market companies in the country. And the Wall Street Journal recognized Bonneau individually, naming him one of the top real estate agents in the United States. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to tell us today.
It's great. And as you'll listen to this episode, you're going to hear some great lessons in how to scale for growth in a very deliberate way. In particular, listen for a couple things. One, listen to how Bonneau deliberately found and built on his skills early in his career. And that early focus helped him really start to accelerate the way he built his business. And listen also how he carefully determines and focuses on that 20% of his business where he can really innovate and move the needle. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but that remaining 80%, he farms out to other very capable people, but doesn't do it himself. And then finally, how he's just constantly open to reinventing and repurposing his business, and in particular, how he gets out of his comfort zone. I find it really interesting how he talks about how he gets out of his comfort zone, which is something all entrepreneurs like us can learn to do. All that is kind of the secret sauce to why I think he's developed something that's truly different and unique in selling residential real estate. So sit back and enjoy the episode with Bonneau Ansley. Well, Bonneau, when you look back on those early years, I know you've told stories about how you struggled in school and how you kind of discovered real estate once you got at University of Georgia. But all along, did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or is it something you found out that you kind of had to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had a choice, right? I knew in life I wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a biochemist, right? And I just didn't fit in that one size fits all box, right? All of my learning was done outside the box. I had success on the sports field, but between 8:30 and 2:30 at school, that was where my confidence drained and where I was not successful and where I was, in the back of the room or in the corner of the room and not getting it per se with what the teachers were saying. I started to find success. I mean, I was in boarding school for 6 years, right? So I was on my own, 2 years in Connecticut, 4 years in Virginia, and having to figure stuff out, early on in life is probably a good thing. It's very, very challenging, but I knew that I connected with people. And I learned that early on in high school when I started creating T-shirts and I started selling T-shirts and and hats, and I had some success my junior year when my high school, Woodbury Forest, played Episcopal, and it was the 100th consecutive match of these two high schools. And I created this hat that said "The Game," Woodbury versus Episcopal, 100th anniversary or 100th reunion, something like that. And I learned cross marketing, where I ended up having success selling to both schools and both alumni bases. And man, I think I sold 5,000 plus hats that weekend, and it was all cash. And at that point, I was like, man, I can see some sort of path for me having success dealing with people, using my creative brain. My brain is very creative. It's dyslexic. So it sees things differently than other people. And it's backwards, and I approach things differently. And sometimes that's good if you can really let your mind kind of go and kind of use that perceived liability as a strength or as an asset. And I luckily, golly, for my parents to be able to put me in a position to be able to know that I'm going to be okay learning outside the box and be okay using my brain and marketing and connecting with people. So yes, I did know I was going to be an entrepreneur. I figured that out early on, and that's kind of helped me clear a path in real estate. And something happened to me my junior year at University of Georgia. And I started taking real estate classes, and God, I was making straight A's and I was loving it. And I was, kind of understanding the different facets of zoning and getting financing and marketing and highest and best use. And all these things just really kind of resonated with me. And early on, I got my real estate license while I was still in college.
Yeah.
So when I graduated college, I was able to jump right in and secure a job outside of Atlanta, which I think was important for me to kind of get outside of the people that I knew, and I could kind of try to hone a skill in on my own. And I did that in Savannah, Georgia. And luckily, I got hired at the Ford Field and River Club to do sales. And I was underneath a maverick salesperson, a really legendary kind of sales guy that, grew up selling Bibles around Hilton Head. And these guys taught me, the secrets to selling and the tactics of selling. And I started selling lots down there when I was 21, 22 years old, and really kind of found the passion of, man, I love real estate. I love selling. And I think that I was really lucky early on to kind of marry my passion and my skill set together.
Yeah. No,
it takes a while.
Yeah. Well, for most people, it does take a while. For you, I think that's part of the amazing part of your story is you found that out early. And before we leave the early segment, just two quick questions. I mean, so when you were like making those hats, making those T-shirts, were you motivated by money, or were you motivated by the thrill of creating something new? Like what'd you learn about yourself?
Well, I was motivated that I was good at something, and I was motivated that I could kind of take something that somebody wanted and see a smile on their face and sell something, and, I have not been motivated by money, and I've always been able to do, what I wanted. And that was a luxury. But I was motivated because I'm very competitive. When I got into real estate, when I started selling at the Ford and Field and River Club, I wanted to be the top agent there early on, and that's kind of carried on and created a work habit and a motivation, or frankly an obsession. Whenever I'm doing something to go all in, if you will, on anything that I'm doing.
Well, and you mentioned too that person you learned from who was legendary sales maverick. Was that in that early journey? Did you find mentors along the way, or was he kind of your first one who really you looked up to and guided your path?
Yeah, early on, a lot of the mentors were the people I was selling property to.
Mm-hmm.
Funny enough, I'd be selling to an older person that was buying a $500,000 lot or whatever he was doing. And I would talk to them, well, golly, how did you get in this position to buy this second home or this third home? And, what's your story? And kind of becoming a student of people that have had success. And being a younger guy selling real estate, 21 years old, a lot of those guys took me under their wings, and they would introduce me to their friends who would come down. And that's when I figured out the power of referrals and the power of keeping up with a great network, because that network has kept me going. Now I'm 48 years old for almost 30 years in the real estate world.
Yeah, no, you've done an amazing job cultivating that network and taking those early years, early lessons, early struggles, and turned it into what's really been just a wonderful career and story, which is still underway, right? So certainly, I know you started Ansley Real Estate in 2015, and you did a lot before that, but it's been an amazing 8 or 10 years there. And in hindsight, it looks easy, but in reality, I know year to year along that way, there's always challenges, and that's always kind of the story. I'm just curious. So, if were there one or two examples where you really you either made a mistake or you had to learn the hard way and had to pivot during any of that period that you'd want to highlight?
I recently wrote a book, and It's called Brokering Billions. And in that book, I talk about life is a set of curves. and it's not a straight line. And sometimes you're on top of the curve, top of the hill, and everything's going your way. But you really find who you are in the bottom of the curve. And I've had many bottoms of the curve. I mean, when I was down in Savannah and I was the number one sales agent at Ford Field and River Club and started to build houses as well, got married in 2001, and we built our dream house, and wife was 9 months pregnant. And after a year of living in our house that we built on the banks of the Wilmington River, our house gets struck by lightning. And it burns to the ground, and we lose everything that we own, even the new nursery that we were going to have our baby in 3 weeks later. Mm-hmm. And that was a bottom of the curve moment. But at that time, you pivot at those times, and we moved to Atlanta, and we started fresh in Atlanta, and we started to develop new real estate, start a new path, and start a new career, which we wouldn't have done if that tragedy in the bottom of the curve didn't happen. Right. Mm-hmm. But that brought us to Atlanta. It brought us in a new path there. And we were going great for several years, from 2004 when the fire happened up till 2008 when the financial crash happened. And during that financial crash, a lot of the people that I've met early on, I would invest in their real estate deals. I did a big real estate deal with a company here in Atlanta, and it didn't go well. And that was 2008. So that was another bottom of the curve. But guess what? That bottom of the curve pushed me into becoming a real estate agent, mm-hmm. right? And from being a real estate agent, I then got back on top of the curve a few years later when I was the number one agent in Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. And then through that process, right, through the fire, through the financial meltdown in 2008, right, I've been ups and downs, but it's put me in a path where I am today that I could have been in Savannah if the fire never happened, which would have been great. I would have been living a great life. I don't know what I would have been doing. You know, would I have started a real estate company down in Savannah selling real estate? I don't know. But I love how God kind of gives you these struggles and these paths, because he pushes you in a place to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and how you're going to react to it.
Right. And did you always
curves, right? Embrace the curves is the basic of a lot of the book, and how to pivot and push yourself through those curves to not slow down and let a curve, where you stay on the bottom,
Right. Right. Well, so how has your concept of taking risk evolved over that time? Right. I mean, because, you've taken some risk, you hit the bottom of the curve, you have to kind of reinvent, reestablish, but you were even taking risk, back in your junior year of high school and college. So,
yeah,
but how's the concept of risk evolve?
Yeah, I've never had a concept of risk, right? I just go. And I think that, if you put yourself in a position to succeed, right, and you take calculated steps and calculated risk, you're going to be great if you are completely obsessed with what you're doing. And I think that you have to be, if you're starting a business, you have to know, and the people around you have to know that this is what you're doing, and for a certain point, there's not a lot of live-life balance, which I know is a big term here in the 2023. But it's hard to get where you want to go without diving in 100%. And if you do that, then you can have a really great balance down the line, and, now I'm not saying we're coasting, right. But we have ups and downs all day long. I mean, today, the day's starting, I'm on a great podcast with you, and, who knows, I might lose a deal later on today, but you've got to just keep going. And I might sell a couple houses today. Right. But the path towards, for me, happiness is having a goal sheet that we do the night before the day starts, going through that and feeling like you've given it all at the end of the day, and being able to spend time with your family, your kids, making sure, they're on track and everything else.
One thing you mentioned interesting. So you talked about how being, having it be an obsession, be all in, and having other people know what you're doing. And you and I have a mutual friend, Mo Bunnell, who has been on this podcast and did a great job talking about how other people knowing what you're doing and believing in you is key. But I just wanted to touch on that. I thought it was an interesting point you made. Do you elaborate a little bit on that? Why does that matter?
Well, for me, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. I like to say a lot, I'm smart enough to know how dumb I am. So when I'm going through and starting a task, I'm going to prepare that task with supporting staff, right? I'm going to have people where I know that I'm not going to be the one that's going to, do this part of the task. I'm going to put an expert in that position. So I've been able to identify people that are much smarter or more proficient in different tasks and surround myself with the best of the best in that. So when I'm starting a business, I'm gonna make sure that everybody knows where we need to be, and I'm gonna put together a team. I'm not gonna say there's any relation to this, but just like a football coach that's gonna have a winning team at the end of the year, there's a lot that goes into that. Right. There's the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, the strength trainer, the dietitian, right. And put together a good base of players that you're going to be able to coach, not have any bad apples or bad seeds that's going to hurt the team from an emotional or just bad attitude standpoint. Right. So you got to put the right team together when you're addressing a task. And I've been able to do that because, again, I know how, I'm smart enough to know how dumb I am, so having said that, aligning yourself to be able to focus on the 20% of that task that you're exceptional at, better than anybody, and having the 80% put together in an organized way with superstars, so you can have a very high success rate going into something. And I've never been afraid to spend money on talent. Even if there's a position that I don't need and there's talent out there, I'll go ahead and hire that talent, and I'll build in a position over time for that person because talent's very hard to find. And once you have talent, the people on my specific team, they've been with me all over, 11 years and some, 14 years, and that's a long time to be, with somebody. So right. When you got somebody, you got to keep them.
Right. Absolutely. How, and just one more on the risk front side, as you kind of go through the cycles we've talked about and navigating risk, the concept of cushion and options is always important, because kind of at that darkest hour, having options, it helps. Right. And at those low points, did you always feel like you had options, or were there times where you're like, man, I got no options? And we've got to dig deep and find something in my soul that gets me through to the other end, because everybody goes through both, but options help and cushion.
Yeah. I've never been in a position where I'm just going to, sit there and say it's over. Right. There's no options. Right. So being creative enough to think outside the box and to do different things where there maybe haven't been a path that you can follow. And I haven't followed a traditional path, when I started Ansley Real Estate. Right. Every year we try to start completely over. Right. There's a term my partner at Christie's, Thad Wong, says, if it's not broke, break it. Right. So every year we try to go ahead and figure out a way to reinvent ourselves. And we've been doing that ever since we started Ansley. When we started Ansley, the name of the company was Ansley Atlanta. Yeah. Right. And after 3 years, we grew out of Atlanta and we were in Blue Ridge. We were at, St. Simon's. We were at Lake Raven, Lake Burton, Clayton. We were all over the place, Marietta, Alpharetta. So then we went to Ansley Real Estate. And then we said, okay, God, we're at Ansley Real Estate. We want to be bigger than this. So then, we became Christie's International Real Estate, Ansley Christie's, right? So we have a global presence, right? And we've got affiliates. We've got 94 affiliate companies all over the globe, right? And every year we're trying to keep bettering ourselves, right? And not staying complacent on where we are.
Yeah. So breaking it in a way is that renewal, right? And keeping you, I guess, open-minded to stay out of just kind of that traditional path, which you've never really followed, right? So it allows you to keep reinventing, I guess, that mindset.
It does. And also staying ahead of technology, right? And trying the new, technical advances that are coming out, and some don't work. Some are terrible, right? But, using AI, God, we were one of the first companies to use AI and figure out who's looking at our website and what houses they're looking at, and be able to contact those people and say, hey, I just noticed you're looking at ABC Banana, 123 Banana Street. Can I help you with that house? How'd you know that? Well, actually, we saw it on your website that you looked at it for 45, and we won't go into that detail, but we have, from an AI standpoint, right? We were one of the first companies to do that. And by using digital marketing and AI and things like that before anybody else, now a lot of people are doing that. We got a great advantage, and we were able to grow from 5 agents when we started to over 415 agents today, right? Sure. And we did 3.3 billion in sales last year, in 2022. And now we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the next move? What's the next wave? How can we continue to stay relevant and ahead of everybody else? Because that keeps you growing.
Such a great lesson. Yeah.
Oh, you want to have a plan. And when I left my old firm that I worked for when I started residential real estate after the crash, I decided that I wanted to work under a different platform. So I created a platform that I wanted to work under and sell real estate, because I still sell real estate. And turns out that a lot of people else wanted to work under that same platform. That's how we've been able to grow. But we keep modifying that platform year after year.
And that platform I've heard you describe before, you've introduced a different buyer seller experience, right? It's not just the transaction itself. You've reinvented that experience, in this process.
100%. And we also have deal management systems, client management systems, all under the same platform. So if you're an agent, you can do a lot on your own and focus on being in front of the client, in front of the buyer or the seller. Right. So we've created a more efficient agent. And if you look at our agents, our, average volume per agent way exceeds any other company in the state of Georgia.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, and what you've just articulated, again, sounds easy, but it takes just being so alert every year. But you have sustained an accelerated growth rate over an 8-10 year period, much better than, most people would ever dream of. So, that process of renewal is such a great lesson and message. Many entrepreneurs we work with and circulate with, I'm always asking them, what is the end game ultimately? Because I think having an idea of where you're headed, of course, is important, but at the same time, it's always changing. So, do you have an idea of what the end game is and what ultimate success is for you, or how has that evolved over time?
Ultimate success for me is changing the lives of our agents. And by changing the lives of our agents, it might be a single mother, right, who's trying to pay for her kids' college, who has not worked, but was really good with people and getting her into real estate. And now she's, selling 20 houses a year and paying for her daughter's college and, able to afford a new house or a country club membership or things like that. Right. And helping those people and my feeling of success day in is when I've seen my agents thrive. Right. And they thrive under the platform that we've created and the teaching that we provide and everything else. And that's the definition of success for me. We've got a mantra, where we say to our agents is how you do anything is how you do everything. Right. So how you, interact with your children, how you interact with the waitress or waiter at the restaurant, how you leave the house. Do you leave your house untidy? Do you work out first thing in the morning? How do you shake a hand? How you leave your voicemail, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And if you think it in every aspect of you do, when you go through a day and you try to do it with excellence and give gratitude, right? That comes back to you tenfold and it becomes a mindset, right? It's if you're walking out of the house and there's stuff at your front door and you just leave that a couple of days until you pick it up. Go ahead and pick it up. Go ahead and put it away. Go ahead and open it up and throw it away and, put it up in the, it comes together in a process, and it's how you treat people. Right. And I think our agents do that and we teach that. And I think that you come into life and you come into making a deal and you're not worried about the deal. You're worried about the people you're representing. And if you have that and know you're playing the long game, life's different and business is different,
So the long game for you, right, is quality of life, success for your agents and also the people who are, buying and selling homes. It doesn't sound like you are saying, you have a financial target or you have a flags in the sand target. Maybe those happen naturally. Those are byproduct.
Yeah, not at all. I think that if you're competing, and I do consider this competing, if you're competing in a large scale and you're giving it your all, everything that you want in life will come to you.
Yeah. Well, and just competing because the real estate industry, just like much of the world I'm in on the investment and wealth management side, can easily be a commodity, right? And you have so many, the barriers to entry getting a real estate license is not big, right? I mean, you can generally just get in. But that said, you have been able, and I think you've articulated why, you've been able to not have this be a commodity. In fact, reinvented it to the point where it's incredibly value added. But let's just pause on that for a moment. I mean, because you have to be competitive in this industry every year.
I'm hyper competitive. Yeah. We had a board when I started selling real estate in Atlanta. It was 2009. It was the worst year on record to probably sell real estate. but there was this scoreboard at the office I was in, and it ranked everybody's volume from 1 to 50 in the office.
Yeah.
So day one, I walk in and I'm not on that board. And I go and I meet with the marketing person who now works for me. It was my first hire. And I said, hey, I'm going to be a real estate agent, but I'm going to do things differently. And at the end of the year, I want to be the number one agent. I want to be number one on that board. She looked at me like I was crazy. Like, how are you going to do that? And I said, I need your help. I need you to figure out a marketing plan for me together, and we need to implement it. And we need to do this, that, and the other. And at the end of the year, I was the number one agent, not only on that board, but in the whole city of Atlanta, my first year in the business.
Wow. Amazing.
And from 2009 till now, I continue to, sell a lot of real estate.
Well, it's interesting that point of transition, how you did leverage that person, brought them in to help you succeed, right? And I've heard you also tell a story, I think back when you were doing more development work back in 2008. And then you, when that kind of crashed in, you actually went to the people who were owning the property, the banks, I think, and said, let me sell our way out of this, right?
Yes.
And you, what could have been across the table from you, you actually brought alongside you to win.
Yeah, that's great that you knew about that story. And, that was a devastating situation where I spent a lot of time building this product, and I knew it better than anybody. And these people were going to hire a salesperson. I didn't have anything to do. I wasn't going to go develop another building. Yeah. And I said, why don't you hire me? Well, that's a great idea. So that got me in day one. And I said, all right, well, if I'm going to be a real estate agent, I'm going to go for it. And I did everything except put a tattoo on my forehead that said, I sell real estate. I'd go meet the valet guys, when I'd go to, expensive restaurants, sit at the bar, buy everybody's meal at the bar, made sure the bartenders, this multiplier effect, right? And having a big team around you, Atlanta, that might not work for you, but are people that promote you when you're not there. If a guy's cutting the hair and say, I think I'm going to move, I'm going to downsize, and the haircut guy says, God, look, this guy, I cut his hair. His name's Bonneau Ansley. Here's his card, or the valet guy, when somebody gets in a Mercedes or an expensive Porsche or something like that. And, if I tip the valet guys $100 for every time he puts my brochure on the passenger seat of an expensive car when I started in this business, and have these multipliers all over the city that are working for you indirectly, that's how I really got in the business and how I got a really fast start.
Oh, it's a great natural insight. I think, you just combine your sales instincts, your relationship instincts, and your competitive instincts into something that does accelerate things. So, interesting here. So the answer, I'm going to ask you a question. I think the answer is self-awareness. I mean, you've just shown a strong sense early on what you're good at and what you're not. But, a lot of entrepreneurs get in their own way as their organizations grow. And, how have you thought about, as your organization's grown incredibly fast, how have you not gotten in the way of that and been able to focus on your skills and let others fill your weaknesses? I mean, you've been deliberate. How have you done it?
That's a great question. I mean, I was CEO of our business for the first couple of years because there was no other choice. And then I was able to hire a managing broker, right, to deal with the ins and outs of the business and the agents. And then I worked myself out of a job, promoted from within, a new CEO for our business. And I did that a couple of years ago. And I typically manage by not giving tasks, but giving responsibilities. And I stay out of the way. If I hire somebody, when I sat in 2009 with the marketing assistant at the old firm and said, I want to be the number one agent. I was at that firm for 6 or 7 years. When I started Ansley Atlanta, I went back to her and I said, you're going to run marketing for my new business. She said, well, I've been with this company for 19 years. And I said, well, I'm going to give you the responsibility to do everything, branding. This is your department, and I'm not going to get in the way. And I've watched that individual grow from being an assistant marketing person at a local office to now running 10 offices for Ansley Real Estate, creating the brand, the website, creating brand for 415 agents, and now helping with the brand and everything with Christie's, which is more global. And that person started in a local assistant role as a marketing person in 2009, and she was there for 19 years.
Yeah.
And now she's our chief marketing officer.
Yeah.
and,
Great story of growth and responsibility.
and an executive. And I've never gotten in the way and said, give me your top 10 things you're doing this week. No, it's the responsibility to create the best brand Atlanta's ever seen. I'm not going to manage your money or how you spend, your allocated bucket. And at the end of the year, if you're not doing a good job, we'll talk about it. We've never had to talk about it. And that's given her the responsibility to go after it and do it her way, because I put her in that position to do it her way.
Sure. Absolutely. And are you still CEO? I can't remember.
No, I worked my way out of that job, and now I'm executive chairman, and that's a great role to be in. I'm there to recruit, tell Ansley's story, and I make major decisions and things like that, but I don't get in the way of running the business.
Yeah. Well, two more quick questions. One, you don't have to give names, but like who is your either business guide or business coach? I mean, how do you make sure you're making the best decisions? I mean, have you built a board of directors that helps with that, or do you just have kind of an informal system?
I've got an informal system. I'm in YPO. I've also got a group of 6 other entrepreneurs that started their business from scratch. We meet for 4 hours once a month. They're, if you will, my personal board, and I'm their personal board. And we share everything financially. We share everything that's going on in the business. And having a group like that, and they're all in different businesses, it's something where I couldn't live without.
I know exactly what you're saying. I have a Vistage group that does the same thing for me. I mean, we don't have a formal board for our company here, but you've got to have those independent sources that help you avoid making a bad decision, right? Because you listen to yourself think too much, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was bad. So no, it's great to those informal advisors that are regular, who can give you independent advice and not like be swayed by you or try to tell you what you want to hear, seems to be just so key. So great to hear that.
And it's all confidential too. So you can share the darkest, most inner thoughts that you have. And knowing that's not going to get out of the 4 walls where you're in is excellent.
Yeah. And so you would agree that is a vital aspect to have for success.
100%.
Yeah. The last question for you. This one, I often end the program by saying, what advice would you give to others, or what advice would you give to your younger self? Our conversation's uncovered so much there. I think what I'd like to try to explore a little bit just finally is you've done an amazing job of always being willing to get out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs just struggle to take it. They say they take risk, but they struggle to really do it. What advice do you give? You do it so naturally, but what advice do you give to help people get out of their comfort zone, get out of the box, as you said early in this segment, and be comfortable taking risk in the unknown?
It's so hard. Writing a book was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Okay.
I'm not a great reader.
Took you back to school, right?
Well, I listen to all the books, and I read a lot of books through Audible. I don't read, I listen, actually. Yeah. And so sitting down and actually, going to boarding school for 6 years really helped management of time, and having great time management, I think, is one of the most important skills any entrepreneur has to have, and knowing where to focus and where not to focus, and being able to have a very efficient day. But writing a book, oh my God, was impossible. And then even reading the book that I wrote for Audible was the hardest thing I've ever done, because I don't read well. I don't pronounce words well. And that was really out of my comfort zone. But at the end of the day, I'm very proud of the book. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And I've also got a podcast called Brokering Billions, where I'm interviewing or having a conversation like we're having today with the top agents across the world. And it's called Brokering Billions. And was definitely outside of my comfort zone to do stuff like that. I don't like to fly. I didn't like to fly. So I took flying lessons to learn the ins and outs of how an airplane actually flies. And now
how is that? Do you have a pilot's license?
No, I don't. Right. But I fly every week somewhere, and, but early on in life, I just didn't like to fly because I just didn't understand it. And so I figured out and, learned how to fly a plane, right? Or enough to take me out of my scaredness of getting on a plane. So I think that's highly important.
So I get advice there to get out of your comfort zone, embrace the unknown, be deliberate in learning about what that unknown is, get more familiar with it, and then of course you don't want to take a dumb risk. That goes back to having that informal board of advisors help you minimize a bad decision. But
well, and I try to live life pretty hard, and I guess I'm an adrenaline junkie or whatever. I mean, I always try things. I mean, and I've done some crazy stuff, and I love what life brings, and I don't say no too much to challenges. I do say no a lot to things that take up my time. I've been doing that a lot the last 10 years, where if anything's going to take time away from my family, where I'm not going to get a return from my agents, I generally say no to it. I think that's been a big thing, because you get pulled in a lot of different directions. Being a founder of a company, you can go on a bunch of different paths, and I try to stay pretty focused on family and business, and try not to get swayed with other things that people might want me to do.
Sure, yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation, Bonneau. I just love the things you've uncovered about yourself, some of which I already knew, but I've also learned myself. So wonderful. So just last question then, if people want to learn more about, Bonneau, you as the person and the way you think, and I know you've got a website that helps outline some of that, as well as, just Ansley Real Estate, how should people learn more?
Yeah, I mean, my website, BonneauAnsley.com, has a lot of speeches and interviews I've done. And, it's a good way to know a lot about me. And, you can follow me on my Instagram, on my realtor page, or my personal page, and you can read my book.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's I know easy to find all that. So definitely go check it out on your website there. Well, Bonneau, thank you very much. Really appreciate you spending the time with us this morning. And these are some great lessons for all of us to hear.
I've had a blast. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Cannon Carr and Lara Dolan back with you. Lara, I just found that such an inspiring and interesting insight into just a great, clever entrepreneur who's built some great things in Atlanta. So before we get into those three summary takeaways that we often do at the end of the show, I thought I'd just ask you, what attracted you to Ansley Real Estate, and what did you think, what struck you as interesting about the podcast?
Yeah, it was so much fun to listen to that. And I have been an Ansley realtor since January of 2000. And I just have to say, I coveted everything Ansley did. And they do it right. They do marketing right. They attract the right agents. They treat agents well. And it's a pleasure to be around people who do things right. Because frankly, not everybody does in our industry, and it feels good to be an Ansley realtor. Yeah,
that's awesome. And that validates a lot of what Bonneau outlined. I just thought it's just wonderful to hear you give testimony to it. So let's quickly touch on those three things that we thought were interesting from the show. The first one is really exploring that real reason for his success, and I think a key part of it is that he found his strengths very early. And he learned what they were very early, right? And some of it's because, his weaknesses were such a hassle for him at first, right? But he learned what his strengths were, and he was able to, I think, leverage them very quickly.
Yeah. Everybody knows 10 real estate agents, right? And for Bonneau to really understand our market, understand what it means to have great talent. I loved what he said about, if it's great talent, you'll find a place for them, which is so true. And whether that's in your personal life or your professional life,
get them on the bus and figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think that is a really special skill. And obviously recognizing great talent is something that he can do real well.
Yeah. So the strengths of understanding the market, I think ahead of most people, and recognizing talent is key. And the other strengths that I thought were interesting was just an innate curiosity, right? He always seemed to want to figure out things with people. And I think another strength is not only his ability to connect so well with people, but to connect with solutions to problems that people are facing. And all that together combined allowed him to creatively, originally, convincingly solve problems. Now, for other entrepreneurs, your strengths might not be what Bonneau's were, right? Yours might be totally different. But the key is, figure out what they are early and build around them deliberately and uniquely. And I just loved how Bonneau did that. The second takeaway I thought was neat was how he talked about getting out of his comfort zone. That's an important mindset for being able to take calculated risk, is getting out of your comfort zone. And it's so hard to do. And the first thing there is to really be aware of where you are comfortable, right? So you can recognize where your comfort zones are, understand it, and then you want to embrace that area you need to stretch into.
I loved what he said about taking flying lessons because he was afraid to fly. Because ultimately, why are people not comfortable? They're not comfortable because they don't understand something.
That's right.
So the sheer nature of understanding how airplanes work replaced something that made him uncomfortable with something that made him comfortable. So a lot of times discomfort is just lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
So going out and seeking that knowledge was great, brilliant.
So embrace that area of unknown, right? And as you push that envelope, you find you get out of your comfort zone. And I love that. And one other interesting thing while we're talking about comfort zones that we explored was the importance of either informal or formal advisors as you make your decisions. And, in these podcasts, we often talk about building an ecosystem of advisors, whether it's a formal board or just an informal group of advisors, but people who are independent to you and how you think. And the key for that and why that's so important is because it helps you reduce the risk of a bad decision. So while you're pushing your comfort zone, trying to take a calculated risk, having those informal or formal advisors to help you reduce the risk of a bad decision is such a key ingredient too. And I noticed he'd wove that into the podcast as well. The final takeaway that we'll highlight, there's obviously so much in here in the podcast, you could go on for a while on this episode, but the other thing I thought we'd highlight was just the importance of pivoting and being willing to reinvent yourself constantly. Of course, as an entrepreneur, you want to do what's working and, and keep at it and keep doing what works. But industries evolve, circumstances evolve. And if you want to keep accelerating your growth rate, you can't sit still and you can't get complacent. So, that constant pattern of renewal was so key. And, I noticed, he talked about, he focused and he found that 20% of his business where he was great at it and it would let him be different and differentiate. And he would focus on that, and he would delegate the remaining 80% that's kind of routine. And Lara, I know you found it interesting about again bringing people on the bus.
Yeah, this industry can be very much a commodity, right? Everybody knows 10 realtors, and what's interesting also is Bonneau's an entrepreneur, but so are each of the 400 agents who work for him. Mm-hmm. So how do you nurture that? And what I think is really interesting is, he's really worked to find people, again, with talent and help them grow. Mm-hmm. So he's gone from being that entrepreneur who identified the parts of his business that he can do really well. And now he's brought people on board to help other people grow their business. So that's also what builds his business, right? So more successful we are. Yeah. It just feeds on himself, and he's done a real good job doing it.
So while he takes the 20% he's focused on and he gives the remaining 80% that I'll say is routine, but it's not because it's easy. It's just that, those brokers, those agents focus on that part of the business and keep building that. And it allows him to focus on that 20%. And then as that 20% he's focused on grows, he hires new people for that, and he finds a new 20% to focus on and gets out of his comfort zone. And successful entrepreneurs who are growing fast tend to do that cycle. And I thought Bonneau did a great job highlighting that today. And the final thing too, he wove in was just where you talked about there's always cycles, right? And sometimes you find yourself at the bottom of a cycle. Does it feel like a dead end? For some people, it does. I love how he says he's never allowed himself to believe he's at a dead end. It's almost like he's just like, I'm just not going to believe it's a dead end. And he'll find his way through it, which goes back to our first point about his strengths, right? And how he worked it. So, just to wrap up, I just thought it was you got a great insight into how just a creative mind works to build and innovate, the residential real estate market in Atlanta, and how he keeps that reinvention process keeps success going. So, well, Lara, thanks for joining me in the studio today. It's been great. It's
My
been fun.
pleasure. Always good to see you.
Did an awesome job, and really appreciated Bonneau joining the program too. So stay tuned for another episode, and we'll see everyone soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.